The cold bit deeper than bullets. The snow fell like ash, coating everything. The ground, the helmets, the blood. Roddie Edmonds' breath came out in sharp bursts, each one heavier than the last. His boots sank into the frozen mud as he kept moving forward, step after brutal step. On his shoulders lay a man, limp, pale, almost gone. His friend, his brother in arms. The weight pressed into Roddie's spine, but he didn't flinch. The battlefield behind him was silent now. The gunfire had faded, the shouting gone. Only the wind screamed through the trees. He didn't know how far he'd come. Maybe miles, maybe days. The world had blurred into endless white, snow, fog, and pain. His legs shook with every step, but he locked his jaw and whispered under his breath, "You're not dying here. Not today." There was no map, no compass, just instinct and a promise he'd made. When the explosion hit their unit, when chaos tore the formation apart, when men were shouting and running and falling, Roddie had looked down and seen his friend, bleeding, unable to move. He could have run. Every voice in his head told him to, but he didn't. He hoisted him up, wrapped his arm tight, and walked straight into the unknown. Now, days later, his lips were cracked, his skin burned raw from the cold. He hadn't eaten since the rations ran out. He'd forgotten what warmth felt like, but quitting wasn't even on the table. Somewhere in the distance, a raven cried. The sky was fading into gray, and the ground beneath his feet started to vanish under the snow. He felt his body sway, exhaustion clawing at his bones. But when the weight on his shoulders shifted, he tightened his grip again. "Hang on, buddy," he muttered, voice barely audible. "I've got you." The wind carried his words away, but it didn't matter. The world didn't need to hear him. Only one person did, and he wasn't letting go until he heard him breathe again. Roddie wasn't marching through war anymore. He was marching through loyalty itself. Before the snow, before the silence, there was chaos. It was late 1944, deep in the heart of Europe. The Allies were pushing into Germany, inch by inch, against a desperate enemy that refused to surrender. Every road, every hill, every village came with a price. For Roddie Edmonds and the men of the 106th Infantry Division, it was supposed to be a routine deployment. Hold the line, secure the area, and wait for reinforcements. But the enemy had other plans. The Battle of the Bulge had erupted, Hitler's last gamble to turn the war around. German forces, thousands strong, had slammed into the Allied lines under the cover of snow and fog. Tanks roared through the forests of the Ardennes. Shells tore the air apart. Men who had never seen combat suddenly found themselves surrounded, cut off, and fighting for their lives. Roddie, just 25 years old, stood in that storm of chaos. He wasn't some battle-hardened veteran. He was a Tennessee boy, calm, quiet, steady. But in war, even the steady ones break. For days, his unit fought back against waves of enemy fire. The sky never cleared. The snow mixed with smoke and blood until it all looked the same. The radio lines went down. Supplies ran out. Frostbite spread faster than hope. Every hour, the sound of gunfire got closer. And then came the order no soldier wants to hear: surrender. Their position was overrun. Surrounded on all sides, low on ammo and freezing, they had no chance. The Germans captured them by the hundreds, disarming, shoving, barking commands in a language that sounded like thunder. For most soldiers, the war ended there, behind barbed wire, as a prisoner. But for Roddie Edmonds, it was just the beginning. He was forced to march with other POWs for miles through the snow. Men collapsed along the way, some too weak to continue. The guards didn't slow down. If you fell, you stayed down. That's where he saw him, his friend, crumpled in the snow, eyes barely open, whispering for help. The other soldiers looked away. Some muttered a prayer. No one dared to stop, not with guns pointed at their backs. But Roddie did. He turned around, dropped his pack, and lifted his friend up without a word. The guards yelled. He didn't care. The snow kept falling. He didn't care. That was the moment the battlefield changed, no longer about sides or flags or orders. Just two men against the cold, the hunger, and the impossible. And somehow, that fight would last for 3 days straight. The first day was a blur. Roddie's legs moved on instinct, one step after another, carrying both his weight and the heavy, lifeless body draped across his shoulders. The snow reached his knees now, the air slicing through his uniform like glass. His friend, they called him Miller, had gone quiet hours ago, his head rolling limply against Roddie's back with every step. Roddie didn't talk much, but that day, he spoke to keep himself sane. "Hey, Miller, remember that diner back home? The one with the jukebox that never worked?" No response, just a crunch of snow. He chuckled weakly. "You still owe me $5 from that poker game, man. So you better stay alive. I'm not letting you die till you pay up." His voice cracked, but he kept walking. The cold numbed his hands, turned his knuckles blue. The rifle slung across his chest banged against his ribs with every step, but he refused to drop it. Not out of pride, but because it reminded him who he was. A soldier, a protector, a friend. As night fell, the forest turned black and soundless. The only light came from the pale glow of snow under the moon. He found a shallow ditch and laid Miller down carefully, brushing snow off his face. He tore a strip of cloth from his uniform, wrapped it around Miller's leg where the blood had frozen, and prayed it would be enough. He didn't sleep. He couldn't. Every gust of wind felt like a whisper telling him to quit, to rest, to give up, to let go. But he had seen what letting go looked like on that battlefield. He wasn't built for that. By the second day, hunger hit. His stomach twisted, and his mouth was dry as sandpaper. He hadn't eaten since they'd been captured. He tried chewing on snow just to feel something. Every muscle screamed, but he forced himself up again. Miller's pulse was faint, but it was there, a small flicker of life, and that was enough. He talked again, this time quieter. "You're doing good, buddy. You hear me? We're gonna make it out of this. You'll tell the boys I carried your lazy self all the way through Germany." The faintest breath left Miller's lips. Maybe it was a smile, or maybe Roddie just imagined it. By the third day, the world around him started to dissolve. The trees looked like ghosts, the snow like ash. He stumbled more than he walked now. Every step was a war in itself. At one point, his knees buckled and they both fell. Miller hit the ground hard, and Roddie let out a sound that wasn't quite a scream, just pure exhaustion turned into noise. He lay there for a moment, staring up at the colorless sky. Snowflakes melted on his face and slid down like tears. He thought of home, of Tennessee mornings, his mother's voice, the smell of cornbread. The things war steals from you piece by piece. Then he rolled over, dragged himself up, and lifted Miller again. "I said I got you," he muttered, and I meant it. When he finally saw the faint outline of Allied lines in the distance, he almost didn't believe it was real. He blinked through the snow, tense smoke figures moving. He shouted until his throat bled, until someone turned, until voices called back. And then he fell, face first into the snow, still clutching his friend's jacket. When they pulled him in, half conscious and trembling, he was smiling, because Miller was still breathing. 3 days. 3 endless days of pain, hunger, and frost. And somehow loyalty won. Some battles aren't fought with guns. They're fought inside your own head. By the second night, Roddie wasn't sure what was real anymore. The cold had numbed everything except the noise in his mind. That constant tug of war between logic and loyalty. Logic screamed, "You're going to die out here." Loyalty whispered, "Not yet." He'd seen what war does to people. It turns men into ghosts long before they stop breathing. He'd seen soldiers step over friends, not because they were heartless, but because war teaches you to survive, not to save. But Roddie couldn't do that. Something inside him wouldn't let him. As he trudged through the snow, flashes of his life before the war began creeping in. His father's workshop back in Tennessee, the smell of sawdust, the hum of the radio on summer afternoons. He remembered Sunday mornings, his family sitting quietly in church, his mom's hands folded, whispering prayers for her son's safety. Maybe it was her voice that he heard now, faint but clear, saying, "Do the right thing, Roddie, no matter the cost." That voice kept him moving. Every time his knees buckled, he'd imagine what it would feel like to drop Miller, to let the cold take him. But then he'd look back and see his friend's face, pale and motionless, and he'd find another ounce of strength from somewhere deep, somewhere he didn't know existed. He thought about fear, how it changes shape when you've been staring at death for days. At first, it's sharp and loud. Then it gets quiet. It becomes something you carry like a weight in your chest. You stop fearing death and start fearing regret. What if he quit now? What if he survived, but Miller didn't? Could he live with that? He knew the answer. He couldn't. That's what kept him walking. Not hope, not courage, just the refusal to let guilt be the thing that followed him home. Sometimes he talked to Miller like he was still awake. "You better wake up soon, man. I can't carry your heavy ass forever." Other times he'd just walk in silence, his thoughts drifting somewhere between prayer and delirium. There were moments when he thought he saw people in the trees, shapes moving through the snow. Hallucinations, probably. Once he thought he heard music, like a harmonica in the wind. He almost laughed. War was cruel like that. It took your sanity before your life. But he never stopped, even when he forgot what day it was. Even when his lips cracked from thirst. Even when his legs felt like they belonged to someone else. He just kept telling himself one thing: "I'll rest when he's safe." And that's what made Roddie different. He wasn't fighting a country's war anymore. He was fighting his own. By the morning of the third day, Roddie couldn't feel anything below his knees. His body had become a machine, not running on food or warmth or even hope anymore. Just raw will. His world was small now, narrowed down to the rhythm of his breath and the heartbeat of the man he carried. He'd stopped counting steps. Numbers didn't matter. Time didn't matter. Only distance did. And even that was a guess. Miller was getting lighter in his arms, and that terrified him. He'd grown used to the weight. It meant life. Now that weight felt different, too still, too quiet. "Don't you do this to me," Roddie mumbled, staggering forward. "Don't you dare." His voice came out cracked and broken. The wind swallowed most of it, but he kept talking anyway. Anything to fill the silence that was starting to feel like a grave. Somewhere ahead, through the blur of snow, he saw shapes, faint outlines, moving. For a second, he thought it was another hallucination. But then he heard something real, voices. American voices. "Hey, over here," he tried to shout, but it came out as a whisper. His throat burned, his vision swam. He tried again, louder this time. "Help!" The figures turned. One of them pointed. Another started running. Roddie took one more step, and then another. His body trembled violently, his knees shaking like glass ready to shatter. But he didn't let go. Not until he saw them. The uniforms, the helmets, the faces of his own men. His legs finally gave out. He collapsed face first into the snow, his hands still clutching Miller's jacket. The world went dark for a moment. He felt hands grabbing him, voices shouting over him, warmth seeping back into his skin as someone wrapped a blanket around his shoulders. "He's alive," someone yelled. "They both are." Those were the last words he remembered before everything went silent again. When Roddie woke up, it was in a medic tent. The air smelled like smoke and disinfectant. His lips were cracked, his body wrapped in layers of blankets. A medic leaned over him and smiled. "You're one lucky bastard, soldier." Roddie tried to speak, but his throat was raw. "My friend, Miller." The medic nodded toward the cot beside him. "He's alive. Barely, but alive. You carried him 3 days through German lines. They said it's a miracle you made it." Roddie turned his head slowly. Miller lay there, pale but breathing, chest rising and falling beneath the thin blanket. He smiled faintly and whispered, "Told you I'd get you home." The medic patted his shoulder. Most men wouldn't have even tried. Roddie closed his eyes. He didn't answer, because in his mind, there was no choice. There never had been. War had taken everything: warmth, comfort, peace. But for those 3 days, it couldn't take his humanity. After the rescue, the war didn't end overnight. Roddie spent weeks recovering, frostbite on his hands, weight loss that made him look like a shadow of himself, and eyes that had seen too much. Miller eventually woke up, weak but alive. The first thing he said was a whisper. "You really carried me?" Roddie chuckled softly, voice rough. "Don't make a big deal out of it." What was a big deal? The other soldiers called him crazy, then a hero, then both. Yet Roddie never wore that title like a badge. When people asked him why he did it, he'd shrug and say he was my friend. That was it. No speech, no sermon, just truth. When the war finally ended, he went home to Tennessee. The fields looked smaller, the sky quieter. The noise of war never fully left him, but neither did the memory of that walk. 3 days that had taught him more about humanity than any uniform ever could. He married, raised a family, and lived a quiet life. But the story didn't end there, because the world would discover that Roddie Edmonds had carried not just one man, but hundreds. In 1945, near the end of the war, Roddie and his fellow prisoners were transferred to a German POW camp. One morning, a Nazi officer ordered all Jewish prisoners to step forward. Roddie, the highest-ranking American there, looked around, then told every soldier, "We're all Jews here." The officer pressed a gun to his head, demanding he identify them. Roddie didn't flinch. "If you shoot, you'll have to shoot us all." The Nazi lowered his gun. Every Jewish soldier was saved. It wasn't until decades later that the world learned what he'd done, not just in that camp, but on that frozen road in the Ardennes. He'd spent his life quietly, never chasing medals or headlines. But history found him anyway. He was posthumously honored as righteous among the nations by Israel, one of the highest honors given to non-Jews who risked their lives to save others during the Holocaust. Roddie Edmonds never saw himself as a hero. But the truth is, he carried humanity on his shoulders more than once. In every war, there are men who fight for victory and men who fight for each other. Roddie Edmonds didn't carry his friend for medals or pride or glory. He carried him because that's what humanity looks like when everything else falls apart. 3 days in the freezing dark, and he chose compassion over comfort, courage over fear. Long after the gunfire faded, his story stayed alive, a quiet reminder that the bravest thing a person can do is simply refuse to walk away. Because sometimes the greatest battles aren't won with bullets, but with loyalty strong enough to carry another man through hell.